Hello everybody, here we are kicking off our season series previews with the Boston Bruins. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So you guys wanted me to start season previews on August 1st, and that is exactly what we're doing. How I decided to go in terms of picking was I had a wheel that I just spun, and I've only done it once, so I have no idea who tomorrow's team is going to be. But we are going to go on with the talk about the Bruins. Boston was a team that finished with 109 points last year, but ultimately fell through in the second round against the eventual champions in their divisional rivals, the Florida Panthers. So for a team that has been able to keep their playoff streak alive for 8 years now, the question then becomes, okay, if we are going to be a playoff team and we are consistently going to get there, how do we get through? How do we get on that run? And how do we win our first championship since 2011? So with all that kind of being introduced here, what are some storylines for the Spoked Bees this season? So the first storyline that we're going to be talking about here is how does Elias Lindholm play in Boston? Lindholm is coming off of a year, especially in his time with Vancouver, where things didn't go particularly well. And he does have potential, as he's been a player that has had 4 seasons with 50 points or more, has been a pretty reliable goal scorer as well, even had a 40 or 42 goal season one time in his career, and is a player that was given a 7-year deal to be with the Bruins, even though he had kind of a down year. So it is a little bit weird, but there is a potential for this one to look good, especially in year one. So I think there's a few things to watch out for. I think one thing that's kind of intriguing is the fact that if he plays on the line with Pavel Zacha, they're both players that can be good off the draw. So you have 2 players that can do really well off the face-off, and you have a player in Lindholm that can play out on the wing. I'm not exactly sure how things are going to go out there for both of them, as they could have Zacha take the face-offs, or they could have, of course, Lindholm. It's going to be interesting, though, because I think especially when you're looking at the 3rd and 4th line centers, they're a little bit young, so they're probably going to need their 1st and 2nd line centers to do well. How exactly Lindholm fits into all this, I'm not sure. But again, there are some other things to look at too. The fact that he's going to be playing with David Pastrnak probably on that top line, or have the potential to, I think is going to be really good, because that could set him up in 2 ways. One where he's either getting assists from Pastrnak scoring goals, or where he is scoring from Pastrnak being able to get him the puck. So this could be a year where Lindholm ends up having a nice, again, bounce back year, and things look good for him. But it is a little bit odd to me that they would go out and give him that long of a deal. But they made a few deals in free agency that were interesting. Of course, they ended up getting him and Zadorov from Vancouver. I see what you're doing, Boston, but for now, they're going to be hoping that he can help them out, as this is a forward group that didn't score as many goals as you probably would have thought last year, and is a little bit top-heavy, so maybe he can even things out quite a bit. But we're going to be looking at a player that can play in a variety of situations, and I'm hoping that he can get a lot of minutes with Boston. But anyway, yes, watch out for Lindholm and see how he does in year one. So the second talking point is, does Boston still have a good goalie tandem? This was something that was pretty obvious last year that they did. In the season prior to that is a Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, a dynamic duo that was part of some Boston teams that were pretty good, in fact, really good at points. But of course, they traded Ullmark to Ottawa for a first-round pick, and they ended up getting Jonas Korpisalo on that deal, which is interesting too, because Korpisalo has not had a good run of things over the past 4 years. In fact, his goals above average, or goals against average, is above 3 in this time, and his save percentage, I believe, over the course of the past 4 seasons is under 900%. So a player that has been down and out a little bit, but we do have to remember that his time with the Los Angeles Kings was relatively productive, and he was able to help LA go on to the playoffs and was a consistent player in net. Mind you, LA was able to have better defensive play. And there's been a lot of talk about, oh, well, Ottawa actually gave up a lower amount of high danger chances, so Ullmark could go out there and succeed with them, and Korpisalo could go to this Boston team that, while better, had worse defensive numbers. The reality is, when you're looking at a lot of these numbers, even at special teams or full strength and all of those things, that they're kind of close in a lot of categories. In fact, sometimes they're like 3 or 4 teams away in terms out of the entire league. So the difference may not be as big as it seems, especially if the defensive numbers hold up as they were last year. So things should be better, right? Well, we won't exactly say that for 100% here. Looking at Korpisalo, it is clear he's had highs and lows, and in recent years it's been a lot of lows. But he is joining a Boston team that's been a regular side to crack over 100 points a year. And while they looked kind of average in a lot of categories last season, they were still able to put together a 109-point year that was impressive. And I think he is not going to be the starter. That's pretty obvious from what we're seeing here. So in a reduced role for a Boston team that was pretty good, he could probably be better than he was last season. Probably significantly better, because last year was just terrible. Which leaves us with Jeremy Swayman. And Jeremy Swayman will always be a player that is very special to me because I think he was the very first prospect we ever talked about over the course of the channel's history. And this is the 5th season preview series that we're doing. So, obviously we've been doing this for a little bit now. And Swayman has been able to put together a very good career with Boston and is off to a good start while also being relatively young. And this year is probably going to be the first season that he gets a crack at playing over 50 games, especially if Korpisalo struggles. They'll probably rely on Swayman a little bit more and say, we've seen what you've done in recent years. We want to give you more responsibility to try to be that stabilizer, the stabilizing presence in between the pipes, to try to help us maintain what we've been doing and then be that guy come playoff time where we can try to break through. So will this be the best tandem in the league? Probably not, but I think if Korpisalo has a bounce back, while they might not be as good as what they were with Ullmark and Swayman should be able to help them out, and then Korpisalo should be better. So then the third and final talking point is, how can this team break through? And this has been something we've been asking for a while now, but it's going to be obvious that you're going to want your free agency players to be able to help contribute to this. But I do think what we're looking at here is the fact that while Boston has got some good players, some of them might only be able to do what they've been able to do, which at this point has been good, but there's only so much you can contribute to a team. Again, we have seen some great players on some teams, and they've been able to have great years, but it doesn't always contribute to postseason success. You're going to need guys to step up, and I think you're looking at players like John Beecher, Matthew Patois, and then you have Mason Lohrei, some of these younger guys that could contribute to the bottom six, maybe to their third pairing, and have things like that help out. Is this a little bit obvious? Yes. But when it comes playoff time, you need to be a machine, and you need to be a machine that is running effectively. And for Boston, it's probably going to be all hands on deck, especially because, like we talked about last year, they weren't particularly dominant in certain categories, and a lot of them are kind of normal stats. Again, the scoring chances, or looking at just the rate that they scored or the rate that they allowed goals. All of these things, if you're about league average, it's not going to be bad because, again, if you're league average across the board, it contributes to being probably better than most teams where they're really good at one thing but they're bad at another. But what we're seeing for the Bruins, if they want to be able to get through, is just having everybody be able to be productive at the right time. And this is a group that's pretty old across the entire roster, but I do feel like these younger guys might have to contribute more, as well as other things like we talked about. So overall, what are my thoughts on the Boston Bruins? Well, this has been a team that's been a relatively safe playoff pick, and I think this year would probably be, again, that assumption that they could go out there and do it, as I feel like last year I kind of wasn't expecting Boston to have as good of a year as they did. So I'm going to back them up and say that they should be a playoff team. You feel comfortable looking at things like their top four for their blue line. You have Zadorov, you have Lindholm, you have McAvoy, you have Carlo, and then, like we talked about with their top six especially, NHL proven players that are going to be able to probably have good years. Special teams maybe can improve a little bit more, and maybe, like I said already, Korpisalo can be a little bit better. I do think there is some pressure from within inside the organization. We talked about how Montgomery could be on the hot seat, as Boston has not produced the past 2 years in the playoffs, and maybe that could be something that could get in the way. But I do feel like this team could be poised to, again, make the playoffs, but then you wonder, does that change happen? Are they finally able to get a little bit of a break and maybe get the puck luck that they want, or just something along those lines? But again, it's not all super rosy, as the Tampa Bay Lightning are trying to reestablish the dark days where they were running the Atlantic and being a Stanley Cup threat. And then, of course, Florida's there, Toronto's there. We've already talked about a lot of these other teams. Boston is in a division that has a lot of ambition, and even a team like Montreal is being thrown out there with potential Patrick Laine trade and being talked about all these younger high picks that could be playing for them. So the waters are treacherous in the Atlantic, and we'll see if the Bruins can bear down in a year that proves to be probably a make it or break it for some people within the organization. So anyway, what are your thoughts on the Boston Bruins for this season? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. We've got plenty more coming out here, as we're going to be getting out all these teams' season previews before the start of the year. So please make sure to check them out and subscribe if you're new. So everybody, please stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.